Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Collins. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Revel, and this is a recording of our podcast, Raging Gracefully. And today we're in conversation with Dr. Susan Hardwick-Smith, who's a doctor from Houston, who I've met before and really enjoy. And she's an expert on all things midlife and menopausal. I'll read her bio in a sec. But we're here today to talk about the latest in weight loss drugs and weight loss management, because I'd started to hear like things from my friends and I'm kind of curious. I wanted a lowdown from a doctor and thought you would too. So let me just read briefly about Dr. Susan. I met Susan when she wrote a book, which I thought was terrific. So Dr. Susan Hardwick-Smith is board certified in OBGYN, has been in practice since 1999. She recently retired as the founder and president of Complete Women's Care Center, which she opened as a solo practitioner in 2002 and grew to be the largest all-female OBGYN group in the country by 2019. As her kind of second act in 2020, she founded something called the Complete Midlife Wellness Center, a concierge practice focused on helping women find their full aliveness in midlife and celebrate the amazing opportunities that menopause brings. And your book is called, remind me what it's called again?
It's called Sexually Woke.
Sexually Woke. That's
Yeah.
right. I'll put it in the chat. It's really a good book. I liked that book a lot. Sexually Woke. Okay. So welcome, Susan. It's nice to see you.
I'm so glad to be here. And this is such a touchy, emotional topic for so many of us in this time of life. I'm 55, and weight is something that is so personal for many of us. But I have found in my practice is one, if not the number one, but one of the first top complaints that a woman has when she comes to see me, without exception, almost in the 45 to 55 and on age group. It's just a challenge to manage. And
yeah, it's the classic kind of 15 pounds middle right stomach kind of gets thicker kind of thing.
Right. And then what I hear often, and I must admit, I was probably guilty of this as well when I was in traditional medicine, we get told these very useless things like, well, just go to Weight Watchers and exercise, or you're just getting older and you need to get used to this new body shape. And if things that feel very dismissive and don't explain what's happening and don't give us any choices about what we could do differently. And not to say that might not be something you choose to accept your new body shape. That's great if you want to, but I didn't want to. I really I wanted to know, why is this happening and how can I stay fit and healthy? And there is a lot of evidence that there is a healthy way. So I don't care about the number on the scale. I just throw the scale away. We want to talk about a healthy body composition. I don't even want to use the word weight.
Yeah. No, but I know, I mean, like the title of your book is Sexually Woke. And, there's this whole the whole fat shaming body positivity movement, which I think is great in a lot of ways. But I agree with you. It bothers me that the culture is now telling people that no matter what size you are, it's healthy, because it's not always healthy, clearly.
Yeah, that's just absolutely true. So one day in the future, when we have machines that are easier to obtain at home, I have in my office a body composition machine that you might see at your gym or something that actually tells you how much body fat and muscle you have. That data is much more important than how much you weigh, because if you're a bodybuilder, you're going to weigh a lot, but you've got low body fat. But there's a lot of evidence that having body fat beyond 30% as women of our total weight is just not healthy. So I absolutely agree that you could love whatever shape you're in, and that's terrific. We want to love ourselves. And if our body fat is over 30%, we are going to increase our risk of things like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, certain cancers, early death. We can make that choice if we want to, but really, you're right. There are certain amounts of body fat that are not healthy. So if I want to be healthy, which is my personal goal,
right,
we need to look at that, but we're not just looking at the number on the scale.
Not in a shaming way, and not in a right, exactly. And also making room for every person should make their own choice about how they want to look and
absolutely
what they want to do, all of that. I think we're completely in agreement on that. So, so we're looking at it both from like a health perspective, and also for a lot of women, it's a huge self-esteem issue, as we know, kind of. So how do you just feel your best, whatever that is for you?
And that's it's such an important point. I don't want to interrupt you, but how we feel about our body. And we used an example of someone who might be significantly overweight and feel great about her body. And so that's great for her. Now, we'd want to talk about the health elements of that, but how we feel about our body, however that is, from all of our conditioning and our experiences in the past, is so so much trickle down. And so, for example, in Sexually Woke, and I work a lot in sexuality, so it's one of my favorite topics. How we feel about our body is the most important thing that drives our libido. I mean, more than resentment, more than hormone balance, more than anything else, which is interesting.
Yeah, no, I
It's
think
not,
that's really
there's so many trickle down effects, just to say.
yeah, I think that's really, really true. I mean, I also, like everyone, I am, 10 or 15 pounds heavier than my ideal weight. And most of the time I'm fine with it. And then sometimes I'll lose 5 or 10 pounds and, I'll go on Weight Watchers and I do feel better when I'm thinner. I feel sexier, I feel better in my clothes, like all the things that we all know. Um, and then I also do try, like most women, and balance it out with like, I feel like I'm really very healthy. I exercise a lot. I eat really well. So I try and kind of accept, it's a constant dance, this body acceptance, body struggle thing for most women. But I do have a bunch of friends in the past few years who have been taking metformin and losing tons of weight. And then recently a friend told me she was injecting herself with something. And I was like, what are you talking about? And
Yeah,
she's not diabetic, but she got her doctor to say she was pre-diabetic and gave her this stuff called Ozempic, I think it's called.
Ozempic. Yeah.
And she has lost 25 pounds. This may also coincide with the fact that she's getting divorced. So divorce always makes you lose weight, in my opinion, in my
Divorce
experience.
and Ozempic will do it. Yeah.
Divorce and Ozempic will definitely do it. So, but yeah, I'd like to know like what is, because it is interesting, right? In today's world, right? We have electric cars. Why don't we have pills that just make us thin with no bad side effects? Until now, I feel like they're those dangerous, like you can take speed and lose weight
That's right.
and have a heart attack, right? That's not good. So
Yeah.
is the world of weight loss changing in a healthy way? What are the promises ahead? What do you feel good about? Also, I'd love you to talk about metformin a little bit because I feel like people talk about metformin like it might be a wonder drug. I've never taken
Mhm,
it.
they do.
But
Yeah. So that's some really great questions. Um, Let me start answering that with just a little bit of background about this whole, what happens, like why do we gain more weight in midlife and what's going on? And so then that would lead to, why do these drugs work for
yeah.
pretty much everybody? There's so many things, more than we could talk about today, but I want to just say, if you've read any articles recently, and there was one that came out in Shape and some other places that said metabolism does not actually slow down in our mid 40s. That's a myth. That is absolute nonsense. These articles actually corrected out for muscle mass, thyroid disease, insulin resistance. All the reasons why we gain weight were taken out. So yes, if you get older and you don't lose muscle and you don't have insulin resistance and you don't have, then your metabolism doesn't change.
Right.
So
We all lose muscle. We
right, of
all
course.
lose muscle in our 30s, for
So
Christ's sake.
those kind of studies drive me crazy, because that particular one that many of your readers might have read, which actually said, metabolism actually doesn't slow down around menopause. That's a myth. It was almost saying, okay, ladies, you're just crazy. You're making this all up. But if you read into the details, it's nonsense. Our metabolism does slow down. It absolutely does. And you know it, and I know it, and my patients know it, for a variety of reasons. And there's so many, and they're different for each patient, but many things happen. I mean, one is just, now I don't, this is my theory and it makes a lot of sense. Evolutionarily speaking, it would make a lot of sense as we get older to become more efficient fat storing machines. Because if I was a cave person, that would be a really good idea, right? We're just trying to survive. So as we get older, we get much better at storing fat. And that's just a fact. We all know it, right? We can't lose weight as easily as we could when we were 20, and we can gain it much easier. So what's the mechanism of that? Was a lot of things going on. Some of them are that we become what's called insulin resistant, which might not show up if your doctor doesn't check for it. But insulin's a fat storing hormone. We make more of it. Long story short is we become more efficient at storing fat through that mechanism. Cortisol goes up. We all know that's a stress hormone. Things like not sleeping as well, which is almost the rule for us as we get older. Cortisol's elevated, so simply sleeping better helps us to lose weight. We're losing testosterone. It goes down to levels that are 0 or very, very low after menopause. And so we lose muscle. We become less active because we're not feeling good. I don't know about you, but when I don't feel good, I know that you're supposed to eat well and exercise, but I just want to drink wine, eat ice cream, and watch TV. And so some of it's behavioral, but it's there's a draw towards that because our bodies just want us to feel better. I mean, you feel terrible, you're exhausted because you're not sleeping, your hormones are out of whack, and so your body's telling you eat sugar. And so just saying, which is very I think, dismissive. Just saying, well, just go to Weight Watchers and go to the gym. That would be like telling if you said heroin addict, just to stop it.
Right.
You cannot, it's a craving. And I understand that that's a very real thing. So we crave sugar because we're not sleeping, our cortisol's high, we're losing testosterone, we're losing muscle. In many cases, our thyroid function's dropping. So all of these things together, we gain weight, and it's usually around the middle because
Yeah.
that's the hardest place to lose. So if we were a hibernating bear, that would be an excellent idea. And so, we still have this ancient
Yeah.
intelligence,
Ancient
right?
foundation. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we're storing fat for some long, cold Arctic winter that's actually
Long
not
cold
going to
winter
happen.
ahead, right?
Right.
It's no longer happening with global warming. It
So
was
if you feel like you're crazy, you're not. This really, truly happens. It happened to me, to every single woman that I've ever talked to in our age group. So if you read anywhere that metabolism doesn't slow down, that is absolute nonsense. It does.
Mhm.
So we get really good at storing fat. So what do we do about it? Well, so we do have to change some things. And after you've complained and whined and complained about how it's not fair, which I have done, and then moving to the next step of sort of choice or acceptance, yes, we can choose to be this heavier shape with a different weight on the scale, what have you. Or if we do really want to try to maintain our healthiest weight, let's just say whatever that is, we have to change some things. So because we're so good at storing fat and our insulin goes up, we need to get rid of sugar and cut down carbs and eat lots of protein. And everybody knows that. All right. I bet your listeners could all write a book on that, but it's hard to do. And so in comes these new, they're not new, but these recent class of medications that are actually incredibly helpful. We use them in our weight loss program in my office, and we just have really great results. So the class, and I want to talk to you about metformin separately because it's slightly different. But the class of drugs that you mentioned, Ozempic is one of the brand names, were originally designed for diabetes. And so 15 years ago or so, Ozempic was introduced to treat diabetic patients, and it does that very well. And then they found, wow, all these people are losing a bunch of weight. And so drug companies, being as clever as they are at earning money, thought, wow, let's change the name and then market it for weight loss for non-diabetic patients, which they did. And so now it's called Wegovy, which is exactly the same thing. So if you're diabetic, it's called Ozempic.
Oh,
If you're
interesting.
not diabetic, it's called Wegovy, but it's the same thing.
Ah, I didn't realize that. Okay.
There's always a little sneaky backstory when it comes to drug companies, but because they're patented, they can sell them for outrageous prices, which they do.
Yeah.
So Wegovy is FDA approved for weight loss in non-diabetic patients. It works a little differently if you're diabetic. So it has multiple beneficial effects for weight loss and sugar management for those who are diabetic or have insulin resistance. It does actually lower your sugar and lower your insulin. And that's really great because insulin's a fat storing hormone. But the way that it works if you take it and you're not diabetic is it's an extremely powerful appetite suppressant to the point where you will not want to eat anything. And we have to watch our patients really carefully to make sure they're not starving because we don't want to lose muscle. So it just takes away your desire to eat, which is great, but you do have to be managed very carefully so that you do eat, because it's very important to eat.
Get nutrition.
Right.
It's very important.
Nothing is perfect. So the old class of medicines, as you mentioned, were all amphetamine based, which are terrible for you. Like you said, you might as well do cocaine. That's also really good appetite suppressant and has about the same list of side effects. And so phentermine and other drugs in that category, they're just amphetamines.
Yeah.
They only work for about 30 days. I mean, just really never showed any long-term results, and a whole bunch of bad stuff happens. So do not take those. That's awful. The drugs in this class, they're called GLP-1 agonists, which is a really fancy long name. Glucagon-like peptide agonists. And so what that means is they have a particular effect in our body, which changes the mechanism of this particular peptide called glucagon. And nobody cares about that so much as to say that it really helps regulate sugar. And in addition, it slows down the rate at which our stomach empties. So normally we're eating and our stomach fills up slowly, but it's also emptying into our small intestine at the same time. And so if you eat slowly, you can eat a lot of food because it's kind of going out the other end at the same time. When you're taking one of these drugs, your stomach doesn't empty. And so you get full very fast. So you eat half your meal and you're like, I can't eat anymore. I feel full. And then it stays
Oh,
full for a long time. So you don't get hungry again for a long time. And
so
that's really
the
great. Yeah.
food, does the
Yeah.
food stay in your stomach longer?
It stays in your stomach longer. And so the downside of that, because everything has a downside.
Yeah, it sounds like that
You
could be bad. Could be bad
you
for
can get
your.
reflux, you can have some nausea because it slows down your bowel function. A lot of people get some constipation. Now, all of those things are quite manageable, and patients are generally pretty happy because they're just not hungry. But
Mhm.
there's certainly some less than pleasant side effects for many people, but totally manageable. So interestingly, studies done on these GLP-1 agonists, and every drug company is making one now because it's like the latest thing you can make billions of dollars from. So there's several
Yeah.
names that you'll hear, but they're all the
Okay.
same thing. They're all GLP-1 agonists. Um, they because oh, so I was my mind went in a different direction. They have been studied against bariatric surgery that makes your stomach smaller, and
Right.
they're equal, which is amazing. So you could, if you have bariatric surgery,
Wow.
you can't eat very much because your stomach's smaller. So,
Yeah.
but you
Who
can
wants
avoid surgery.
surgery?
Right.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
actually
yeah.
really great that we have something that can compare to surgery.
Okay, so I have lots of questions. So
Yeah.
number one is how long do people, is it only an injection? You have to
Yes.
inject yourself? You can't take a pill?
That's right, because these are in the class of peptides. So peptide science is, we can talk about that. That's a whole nother incredible emerging science. So peptide just means it's a short chain of amino acids. Amino acids are what make up protein, right? So a protein's just got lots of amino acids. A peptide's a short chain one. So these are peptides. If you put them in your stomach's going to degrade them and they won't be able to work. So that's why they have to be given by injection.
Okay.
It's a once a week injection, which is with a tiny needle, and patients learn how to do it themselves. Um, it's really easy.
So only once a week. Okay. And then
Mhm.
how long do people typically stay on it? And is it the kind of thing that soon, like everyone who's just 5 or 10 pounds overweight is going to be doing this? Or is it really only for very overweight people?
Well, anyone can do it. It's just a question of money, right? They're really expensive. So if you're, depending on your insurance, if you have insurance, if you're a diabetic or morbidly obese, sometimes your insurance will cover it. If you're just a patient who wants to lose 20 or 15 pounds, you won't get insurance coverage, and it's quite expensive.
How
And
much?
there's ways around that too that I can tell you about, that you can get it for much less money. But typical cash prices at the moment, and these are going to be under patent for several more years, which is awful, and don't get me started on that, because these are such great drugs that could really revolutionize the health of our country, but only wealthy people have access to them. It's terrible. But that's where it is right now. But if you had the means to pay for these things, they're about $1,500 a month,
Oh,
which is unmanageable for almost everybody.
yeah.
So because Ozempic's been around forever, and there's experience for 15 years of people taking these long term, and very safe. So we know it's safe long term because people have taken it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Wegovy, which is the same thing, remember, just FDA approved it for weight loss, was only tested for weight loss for up to a year. So you might read you should only use it for a year, because that's just, the FDA just works that way. They just only approve things for how long the study lasted. But actually you could take it for 15 years. We know that, or forever. But you probably don't need to. So what we find with our weight loss patients is when they get to their goal, they get off of it, and
Right.
your stomach is smaller. You've learned how to eat less. You've developed a healthy movement plan.
Yeah,
You
often
don't need it
habits.
anymore. Right.
Yeah. So it takes
So
20.
usually about 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a new habit and you don't need it anymore. If you have a longer journey, if you're trying to lose 100 pounds or however many, you can keep taking it. So I think it's a
Sounds kind of
really
awesome.
great,
How much weight
yeah.
do people typically lose in the first month or two?
So we have a weight loss program. So we've got tons of data on that I can share with you. So for patients in our program who are using this medication, of course, it's along with hormonal management. So you can't just do it in a vacuum. Well, you can, but it won't work as well. Along with hormonal management, making sure everything's optimized, along with accountability coming in every 2 weeks, along with a healthy movement plan, including strength training, because we've got to not lose muscle,
Yeah.
intermittent fasting. Usually our patients eat 8 hours a day with a 16-hour fast. All of that together plus some mindset coaching and all the things in a bundle, lose about 10 pounds a month if they have 30 or more pounds to lose. So of course, if it's less than
Mhm.
that, it's a bit slower. So a patient who wanted to lose 30 pounds typically will lose that in the 12-week program
Wow.
without losing muscle, without being hungry. It sounds too good to be true, but it really is amazing. And then hopefully getting off of it, once we've reached that goal. So this is just, who knows what we're going to have in the next 10 years, because these drugs are relatively new in the weight loss scene. And
Yeah.
so another thing to point out is if you're not diabetic and all it's doing is being a very powerful appetite suppressant, which it is, and it also works on a different mechanism on our brain, which reduces cravings. So it's being studied for use for addiction and other things, because I tried it actually. Just I never want to give my patients anything I haven't tried. I'm addicted to potato chips. And when I
Uh-huh.
was taking this, I would eat one chip and then be like, "Meh." It's so strange because normally I'd be like, I couldn't. If I open the bag, it's empty. No.
Yeah, I'm a little addicted to pretzels, so I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when I took this medicine, I would literally eat one and be like, "Ugh, it's I don't want it. It doesn't taste that good." So it's quite amazing, and that's on a working at the level of a brain neurotransmitter that's responsible for cravings. So a lot of us struggle, like I was mentioning, with what feels like uncontrollable cravings for things that we know are not good for us. For me,
Yeah.
it might be potato chips, ice cream, wine. If I'm grumpy, tired, angry, I'm going to go for those. And many
Totally.
of us have that, and it's easy to say just don't do it, but it's very hard to not. So the way that it reduces cravings is quite amazing. And so I think we're going to see it in addictive medicine and all kinds of things where it's actually being
Really
studied.
interesting.
You
Well,
know.
you're definitely good at talking about this. It's definitely making me want to try it. I just want to lose 10 pounds. Like I feel like I want to try.
Actually, probably half of our patients in our weight loss program only have 10 or 15 pounds to lose. They're not obese. They
Yeah.
just want to lose that extra 10, 15 pounds. So there's no person who shouldn't take it. I mean, certainly your insurance won't cover it, but
Right,
if you're
right,
going
right.
through another avenue and you can, so speaking about how to make it cheaper, these drug companies, I don't have any problem with trying to make it cheaper. Let's just say it's awful that they charge so much because it costs them a fraction of that to make.
Yeah.
Compounding pharmacies can make the generic form of this stuff. It's called semaglutide. And so
Okay.
you can get compounded semaglutide for a fraction of the price. And we do that in our practice. Have a great compounder, and it costs about $300 a month, depending on how much you use, which is still a lot, but
Yeah.
much better than
Much
1,500.
cheaper. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are ways to get around that.
All right. I have a few more questions, and also there are questions in the chat. One question is, diabetes is so on the rise in this country, and I have a lot of friends who are told they're pre-diabetes. Does this help if you're pre-diabetic?
Absolutely. So the perfect, that would be the perfect patient to take this, because you're getting not only the benefit of appetite suppression, but it's also a diabetes medicine. So
Yeah.
type 2 diabetes, as your listeners know, it is a mechanism where we actually produce too much insulin rather than too little. We have too much insulin. So it helps lower insulin, lower blood sugar. Insulin's a fat storing hormone. So when I find a patient who's pre-diabetic and she also would be insulin resistant, it's a similar mechanism. This is a fantastic choice because it kills two birds with one stone.
Two birds with one stone. Right.
And then we
Exactly.
also need to talk about metformin whenever you have time, but
Yeah, I want to get back to metformin in a second. So also, what are the side effects? So nausea.
GI stuff. Because if you can
Yes.
imagine your stomach's full and it's you burp. I
Word.
tried it. So I would burp in the afternoon and taste what I ate for breakfast. I mean, just a bit yucky
Okay.
because or heartburn because it's actually still
And
in your stomach.
where do you inject it? In your ass, in your thigh?
Well, it goes under the skin. So it's the tiniest needle, if you're familiar with a Botox needle, a 30 gauge needle, tiny,
Yep.
just under the skin. It's just a few millimeters. So just under the skin, usually of your tummy, because it's easy to get to. I mean, you could put it under your skin anywhere. You
Got it.
cannot even feel it. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
It's
All
so
right. All right.
tiny.
I'm sold. All right. So let's see some questions from the chat. Um, Someone says, how far does the follow-up research go with these drugs? Does the weight stay off permanently? I would guess the answer to that is no, unless
Yeah,
you
right. So, well, in the,
depends on your,
so there's the diabetic arm, which has been around for years. And so those patients have been studied for 15 years. And so, but they're staying on the medicine to treat their diabetes. They're not going to get off of it.
right.
Studies done on weight loss only went up to a year. So the weight loss stays off permanently if you continue eating less. So it's not magic. It doesn't make you lose weight. It just makes you eat less.
Right.
So kind of like if you have bariatric surgery, many patients, unfortunately, because they're not in a comprehensive program, they just start eating more and they stretch their stomach back out.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
key is to be in a comprehensive program where you're really being taken care of holistically. I would never just say, go take this and have a nice life. No, you got to be monitored closely.
Yeah, it's like anything. I mean, it's discipline, right? Like a lot of people have psychological people eat for all sorts of different reasons. And so if you're going to keep eating because you're depressed or angry or whatever, as soon as you go off
Right.
you're going to have the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like you mentioned the habit thing, and it's different. People say it takes, I don't know, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever number to break a habit. But if you just say 12 weeks, that's our magic number in our program. But if you've been doing something for 3 to 6 months, you've learned how to eat differently. And so it will stay off if you keep doing that. Yes.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
can certainly gain all the weight back if you go back to your old
Totally.
overeating pattern.
Yeah,
So,
makes total sense.
but once you learn how to do something, if you're getting this works for many people anyway. If you're getting great results, you've seen how much better you feel, you've got all this positive feedback, it's much easier to keep doing it because now you're like, holy crap, this is working. I feel great. Everyone's telling me I look great. I feel stronger.
I
I
feel
want
more
to keep doing
sexual,
it.
I feel
Yeah.
happier in my foot. Right.
And then
Exactly.
you're getting a dopamine hit every time your friend tells you you look great or you lift a heavier weight at the gym. I mean, you're getting dopamine hit from something other than eating ice cream or potato chips, which also gives you a dopamine hit. But you start getting those kudos in a healthier way, which
Yeah.
is really fun.
Which is really great. Someone says, I asked my doctor about Wegovy and he said it's not approved for people over 65.
Well,
That's not true.
here's my opinion. I don't care what the FDA says about very much, honestly. I mean, I'm glad that we have them, but that's a whole nother topic. I mean, whatever the FDA says is approved or not approved, we have to sort of take that with a grain of salt because, so maybe the studies didn't look at patients over 65, or we just have to use our common sense. Just if it's fine when you're 64, why does it suddenly become unsafe when you have your 65th birthday? It's kind of like hormone replacement. Let's just use judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If
So I
somebody
guess,
really,
it could be hard to get. Like the friend of mine who's using it right now, like not anyone will just prescribe it. You can't go ask your primary care doctor for it, I think, at this point, right?
well, it depends. It depends who they are. So there are, doctors are just people and they've got all the same number of personalities as regular people have, right? Well, they are regular people, turns out. So some of them are going to be very stickly about the rules, and some of them are going to be very open about trying to do whatever it is to help you. And then there are some centers like mine who use compounded semaglutide, and we're happy to give it to anybody because whatever hypothetical risk you might imagine, and honestly, with 15 years of use, you can kind of, there aren't any, but even if you had a hypothetical concern, the benefit is you're reducing the risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, multiple cancers. So even if you were playing the devil's advocate and said, oh, what about there's a little risk? Well, okay, maybe there's a little risk. There isn't, but maybe there is. But the benefit is like massive. So similar to hormone replacement.
Super
massive
interesting
benefit, tiny risk.
Yeah. So let's talk about metformin, because metformin is also an old diabetes drug, right? I had never heard of it until one of my daughters had PCOS, or they thought she had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, for a while. And she prescribed metformin. And it helped her lose a little weight. And she was on it for like a year or two, and then she didn't have PCOS and she went off it. But at the time, I did all this research into metformin and read that like they think it's a wonder drug and it might be prevent everyone from getting cancer.
Longevity.
Yeah. And then another friend of mine, more our age, went on it because she was diagnosed as being pre-diabetic, and she lost 35 pounds and has continued to stay on it and looks fantastic. So why isn't everyone taking metformin?
Yeah, that's a good question. And some people say that everyone should take metformin, and the FDA is actually doing a very long-term study now on metformin, which, as you mentioned, is a diabetic drug. It's not a very good diabetic drug, so it's not used primarily for that anymore. But because it's been around for so long, we're in the longevity science, which is different than weight loss science, but this is also very interesting. In the longevity science field, everybody's looking for like what is the thing that we can take that slows down the what's called senolytic process, or just the natural aging of our cells. And one of the very popular things that's studied is metformin, and it seems to be that patients who take metformin have a slower process of aging of various cellular mechanisms. And so probably in 20 years, we're going to recommend everybody take it because of its anti-aging properties. So that's very interesting. And the FDA is actually involved in a study to see if that's the case. Because right now it's not FDA approved again. I don't care about that so much, but it's not FDA approved for anti-aging.
Mm.
But it will be.
So
down the road. But as far as for weight loss, yeah, it's another drug that helps with lowering insulin, helping with blood sugar maintenance. It's not an appetite suppressant, but it does work decently well for those mechanisms. So for someone who's either diabetic or insulin resistant, PCOS patients have insulin resistance. It's another thing that helps, but not nearly as well as these other
Not
drugs.
nearly as well as these other drugs.
But
Very,
it's more available. And so it's very easy to get, or
yeah,
somewhat easier to get.
yeah, yeah.
And then it probably makes you live longer. So
I know. Now I'm wondering what drugs you're on, because it seems
yeah.
like we should all be taking these things.
Right. I mean, who knows? There's a list of things that are the next magic thing for longevity, and metformin is definitely one of the ones at the top of the list. Estrogen actually is also.
Yeah, no, I have to say I'm on HRT, and I think we probably discussed this years ago. My mom died of early breast cancer, so I resisted HRT for a while.
Yeah.
And then I had such terrible hot flashes and such lack of sleep that I felt like this has got to be worse for me, and went on low dose HRT and really feel great. I still have some, as I talked to you about before, some, I think, numbing of my sexual response is just not as great. I still want to have sex, but my orgasms are less good. But actually, I'm just about to start Inter Rosa, which I'm kind of excited about.
Yeah.
And then I finally got a good doctor in New York after my OBGYN retired, which was a huge bummer. But now I found someone good. So we're going to try Inter Rosa, and then if that doesn't work, we're going to try a little testosterone. So I'm on it. But
yeah, well, don't wait too long to start testosterone. There are numerous, and I take it, and there are numerous studies that show that in postmenopausal women, testosterone improves sex drive. I mean, that's like, if you care about studies, and of course, I try to practice evidence-based medicine. There's tons of studies showing that helps. So yeah, that's a good one. And then you've already done the O shot before, which is using platelet-rich plasma.
Yeah, yeah,
that helps a lot of women.
Not what everyone. Is your thought about Inter Rosa?
It's not, yeah, it's great for vaginal moisture. That's what it does. So it helps with vaginal moisture, and that's really good. We want that. That's about what it does. So all of those things are good, but I think testosterone's a really important hormone that we lose with menopause, and it's often ignored.
Yeah. I think I worry a little just because the women I've spoken to who have done testosterone talk about the hair. I already have a fair amount of hair. I don't really want more hair, so I'm a little, but I guess if you,
too much. Yeah,
you can take a very little bit.
That's right. So everything that's good is not always good in higher quantities, right? So testosterone's great, but too much is terrible. So the trick is to get enough to help with sex drive and not create any side effects like acne, hair growth. I take it, my skin's great. I don't have hair growth, but I have a very low dose, which turns out.
And how do you do it? Do you just like dab a little bit of cream on between your thighs?
I do it in pellet form.
You do the pellet.
So pellet form, you get a stable, even dose for about 3.5 months, whereas cream, I just honestly can't do it. I would forget, but you have to do it twice a day, measure it, dry your arms, don't touch the kids, all the things. It's too hard for me to do. So pellet's easy. I just have it in there and off I go. So those are both great options, just depending on your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then regarding how that ties in with weight management, it's absolutely true that when we're taking testosterone in the appropriate amount, not too much, it helps with muscle development. Now, you're not going to bulk up. Don't worry. It's not like an anabolic steroid. But when we were 30, I could go to the gym and do 10 reps and be like, look, I got muscles. And now you can work out till the cows come home and you can't gain any muscle. So testosterone absolutely helps with muscle conservation, which helps with our metabolism.
So true, because everyone tells us to do strength training, and I know we should be doing it. And for like, I was diagnosed with osteopenia last year, but you can't tell the difference when you do strength training at our age.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like is this cycle that feels like it's just going, it's like one more thing. So great, I'm insulin resistant, I've got sugar cravings, and now my muscle's going away, and now my thyroid's low, and it's like, good Lord, can I get a break? Well, you actually can.
Yeah.
We just have to like literally break that cycle and start moving things in the opposite direction. So hormone replacement, along with these drugs that help you to break the cycle of gaining more fat, sleeping better. I mean, just it's a bunch of things. There's not one thing.
Yeah,
It's a
that
bunch of
women
things.
really
Yeah.
need. And it's so great that we have women like you who are running, offices that are just focused just on this, because there are so many issues. It's funny, this is the second podcast I've recorded today. And I was talking this morning with someone who, a doctor, an OBGYN who had breast cancer in her 20s. So she specializes in premature menopause. And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
complicated, all this stuff. And we really often can't find the help we need. And then I talk to people like you, and I'm like, there are answers. There are really good answers and great people out there to help us, but we have to find them. So very
It'll
grateful.
get better, and it is really a shame that it is so hard to find. Because I mean, I know this is true, and it happens all the time. If you went to the group where I used to work, you would get the same old useless answer, and I used to get it
Yeah,
myself because we're not educated. I would tell patients, "Well, just go to Weight Watchers and lift weights." Well, that's great, except I don't feel good. I can't.
right, right.
I remember when I was hormone depleted, I would drive to the gym and sometimes park in the parking lot and turn around and go home. I couldn't do it. It was not just that easy. So
Yeah,
we've got to feel better first before we can do these things. I mean, you can't just
tackle
say
other
go
things.
do it. You got to feel good first.
Yeah,
So I always say hormones are the foundation, and
it's
then
so
the other,
true. When
yeah,
I
and then,
went on hormones, like I started sleeping like a baby again, and
right.
it made the world of difference.
If
Yeah,
I don't sleep, I want to eat sugar, drink wine, and watch TV. I do not want to go to the gym and eat protein. I just don't. And it takes so much energy to overcome that. It's just not going to happen. And it's certainly not going to happen long term. And so we've got to feel better first, sleep well, you know, have our hormones balanced, in my opinion, make sure everything's working. And then going to the gym and eating well is not that hard because you
yeah,
feel good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this has been wonderful, guys. I hope everyone got their answers and questions answered. And I just love talking to you always, Susan. It's been too long. It's really great.